I was conducting a meeting with church leaders in Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, Japan, South Asia. And one of the men came to the meeting, and I could tell he was in some pain or some difficulty, and he's had some health issues. And so I asked him if he were okay, and he said, well, and it was late afternoon his time, Philippines. He lives in Baguio City. He said he was out open air preaching. That's one of his ministries. And 6 men came by on motorbikes with buckets of scalding water and threw them on him. And his back and his shoulder were burned. He had just come from the hospital and gotten antibiotics, and he said, it hurts a lot, but I'm going to be okay. So those things that we read about in that chapter, Hebrews 11, about what people have gone through for the Lord, those are still happening today, and we need to remember our sisters and brothers all around the world. And Brother Popoy is a case in point. I've got to say, too, Don, you've got your beautiful baby here. Just to let the people on the prayer chain know, we prayed this last week for a beautiful baby named Serenity. She had some major health issues and had to go to Children's Hospital. But baby Serenity's here today, and the Lord has touched her life and body. So I want you to know that. It's just to encourage those who've been praying, so thank you. You know, I really appreciate seeing all you people, and I mean that as sincerely as I know how to say anything. This last week has been a very full week, but I've had occasion several times this last week to be in other churches, with other believers not of our church family. And you know what it did? It made me appreciate you people. Because I encountered some strange people. I kept running into people in these other places that it's like they were performing. You know what I mean? That their religion, they wore it on their shirt cuff, and they were behaving certain ways because that's the way we behave. And speaking certain ways and acting certain ways. And it was all very foreign to me. And so it just made me appreciate you people, because you ain't acting like nobody except yourself. And I love that. And we're going to get through this thing alive, I promise. But we don't have to put on, do we? And it just made me appreciate my church family. And so today I want to give you a gift. I don't want to correct anybody. I don't want to talk about anything bad. I just want to give you something just to bless your life. Something that I found. Mark 14 is where I found it. You may want to turn there. You see, what I want for everybody in our church, here's my fondest wish. I want you to be an unapologetic follower of Jesus. That's what I want for you. I don't want you to back up to anybody. I don't want you to feel like you have to apologize. I don't want you to feel less than. I want you to be an unapologetic follower of Jesus. I want you to be somebody who can say, Jesus to me is altogether lovely. That's what I want for you. Now I'm aware, and you're aware, that there are many people that try and put you on your back foot sometimes. And when they find out that you're in love with Jesus, that you're a follower, and that you mean it, they urge you, now be reasonable now. Don't go overboard with this thing. Remember, there's a real world out there, they would tell us. And you've got to come back down to earth sometimes, so don't get too carried away with this relationship with Jesus thing. And they even play around the word that everybody hates to hear. You don't want to be a fanatic. Well, there are plenty of people out there that will say that to us, and they've said it to you. And they try to rain on your parade. Well, I want us to look in Mark 14 at a case where some people tried to rain on an unapologetic follower's head one day, and they were pushed back forcefully. by Jesus. Stories in Mark 14, you can pick it up about verse 3. It says, while he was in Bethany. Now just stop for a second. While he was in Bethany, he's in Bethany. Bethany is a bedroom community to Jerusalem. It's a near suburb. It's up the hill a ways. He's in Bethany because this is the last week of his life. In fact, this is probably Wednesday of the last week of his life. And he's staying away from Jerusalem at night because bad things happen at night, and he has offended the powers that be by going in and cleaning out the temple. And that irritated them a lot. It irritated them a lot that as he comes into the city, people are yelling, Hosanna, Hosanna. God saves. And they're waving palm branches, and they're welcoming him. And they're crying out to him, and they're glad to see him. And it gets into their DNA to the point that later on that same day, the little kids are doing it. They're parroting what they heard their parents say. When they see Jesus, they say, Hosanna! In their little kid voice. And it irritates the authorities. And they put out the word that if we can get our grubby hands on him, there won't be any more hosannas around here. And Jesus is aware of that. Jesus is not by a long shot stupid, and so he doesn't stay in Jerusalem at night. He goes up to Bethany, and he stays, this word says, in the home of a friend. Now, he's got a lot of friends. That's a safe space, Bethany. It's the home of Lazarus, whom he's brought back from the dead, and he's friends with him, but he's also friends, very good friends, with his sisters, Martha and Mary. So that's a logical place for him to be, out of the clutches of the evil ones. They're in Bethany. But he's not staying with Lazarus and Mary and Martha. He's done that a lot, but not this trip. It says that he's staying in the home of a fellow they call Simon the leper. Simon the leper. Now, he's not a leper anymore. Otherwise, you wouldn't stay in his home. And his home wouldn't be in Bethany. It would be out somewhere by the junkyard. But he's staying in the home of a guy they call Simon the leper. That's because he used to be a leper, but he's not a leper anymore. Jesus has healed this man. But he still goes by the name. I remember a kid, his name was Dewey. His shirts, his clothes were always dirty, always smudged up, always had food stains on them and just grime and dirt. And so we called him Dirty Shirt Dewey. As Dewey got older, he cleaned up. He didn't always wear dirty shirts. In fact, he outdressed most of us. But we still called him Dirty Shirt Dewey. Well, it's the same with this guy. He's still Simon the leper, but he's not a leper anymore. Jesus is staying in his house. And in fact, it says he's reclining at the table. What's that all about? You've seen the Last Supper picture, Da Vinci's masterwork, where Jesus is in the center. The table is spread with the banquet. And it's like Da Vinci has snapped the shot at just the moment that Jesus says, one of you is going to betray me. And they're saying, Lord, is it I? And that's why you see Judas clutching the money bag. This is getting serious. It's why you see all of their attention on Jesus. And you see one of them with their finger up saying, Lord, is it I? Is it me? Because they recognize that they've all got the potential to be a Judas too. So am I the one? It's just that moment that the picture is sketched in by the artist. It's kind of crazy when you think about it, that scene that is so familiar of the Last Supper. They're all on the same side of the table. That's unusual. It's like they're posing for the shot. Well, you know that didn't happen that way because nobody does that. But the other thing that they didn't do in those days is they're seated at a table like we would be seated at a banquet table. They didn't do that. Their tables were low to the ground, and you didn't sit on a chair or a stool, but you reclined on a cushion. You relaxed as you ate. Kind of like in some really fancy Japanese restaurants, you take your shoes off and almost lay down. That's what he was doing. That's why it says he was reclining at the table. They were eating. And while they're reclining at the table and eating, they're came a woman with an alabaster vial of very costly perfume. Alabaster is a material that's easy to carve, it's easy to shape and sand, and it's very soft, but it'll keep its shape if you're not too rough with it, and it's translucent. You can almost see through it. In fact, the ancient people used it as glass in their windows sometimes. And this alabaster contained a very costly perfume. The reason they did that is they would put this costly perfume in the alabaster vase or box or vial. And then because it was so soft, you could fashion it in such a way that you could seal it up without having to put a lid on it. And that way the expensive contents would not leak through a lid. There wasn't one, and they wouldn't spill over. But the way you got to the perfume was you had to break the thing. And that's exactly what happens. There came a woman with an alabaster vial of very costly perfume of pure nard. That was a mixture of all these aromatic, good-smelling oils that had come all the way from India, thousands of miles away. This was a product of the Orient. And she takes it and she breaks it over his head, and she poured it on his head. But there was some people there, it says, indignantly remarking to one another. This is Mark's account. When Matthew tells the story, he tells on himself. Mark would not have been there. Mark gets his information from Simon Peter. But Matthew was there. He was an eyewitness, and he tells on himself and the others. And he says that the ones who are scolding this woman are disciples. They're followers like she's a follower. They're other believers. And they're indignant, and they say to one another, "Why has this perfume been wasted? Why has it been wasted?" And then they rationalize, and they bring in the poor people. Anytime you want to win an argument, bring in the poor people. For this perfume might have been sold for over 300 denarii, and the money given to the poor, and they were scolding her, so it wasn't a one-time thing. They were bully-ragging this lady for what she had done. It says that it was worth 300 denarii. It doesn't mean a lot to us, but a denarius was one day's wage for most people. So you got 300 days' wages here. Now let's do just a little bit of figuring. In a given year, there are 260 working days. This says 300, so we'll round up. It's more than. But I just checked this week, and the average income for an individual in the United States right now is $66,226 per year. Now, for some of you, you're now feeling pretty lucky, because if you make more than that, you feel good. But for some of you, you feel like you do when you go to look at model homes, and you come back home and you say, "I'm living in a dump." Well, now you feel bad if it's under, but that's the average, they say, $66,226 a year. That's what she poured on his head. You've never given anybody a Christmas present like that. And so they look at her and they look at this as a waste, and they say, "Why did you waste this?" And then they come up with this idea. You could have given that amount of money to the poor. And Jesus says to them, "Let her alone. Let her alone. Why are you bothering her? She's done something good for me." That's the way he reads it. And then he goes on and he gives what to me is an indicator of how you should plant churches. He says, "The poor you always have with you. Whenever you wish, you can do good to them, but you don't always have me." I figured out a long time ago, and you can disagree if you want, but that may be Jesus' direction about where to plant churches. With this idea in mind, if you look around you and there are no poor, you may be in the wrong place. Now, I know lots of good churches. I know lots of good churches in our city. And I'm pretty sure that most of them I know, if somebody who was desperately poor showed up on their Sunday morning, that they would be welcomed, they would be embraced to some degree. They would not be shunned. They might even be helped. But that's not the issue. There's so many places where the poor and the helpless and the hurting, they don't feel like they would be welcome and they can't go there. It's not accessible. And that's why I think when Jesus says, the poor you always have with you, that when we plant a church, we should be able to look around and say, yep, they're poor around here. And we could embrace them. It's easy for them to get in here. Simply put, what it means to me is if you look around you and there are no poor, you may have put your church in the wrong place. Anyway, you can argue with me if you like. The poor you always have with you, and whenever you wish, you can do good to them, but you don't always have me. She's done what she could. She's anointed my body beforehand for burial. And that's exactly true, because Jesus' burial will be in a few days from this, and it'll be a rushed affair. They won't have time to anoint his body and wrap it and prepare it properly. They won't have time to add the spices that will help with the decomposition. They won't have time, and they'll put him in the tomb without all of that preparation having been done. That's why you read that a group of good women come on the first day of the week. They come on Resurrection Day, not knowing that his tomb is empty, but they're coming loaded down with some spices, not as expensive as this, but they're going to do the deed. That's why they're there on that Sunday morning. They didn't get a chance to, but this woman does it before the burial. So it's important to Jesus because it's part of his death story. Anyway, they look at her and they say, what you've done is too extravagant, lady. It's too much. It's pointless. It's meaningless. That's why for a few minutes I want to talk about useless worship. Because I believe that useless worship is the best kind of worship. They accuse her of waste. We could waste time with Jesus. And wasting time with Jesus is never too extravagant. Like her work here, it's never too much to waste time with Jesus. Why did Jesus say to these people, let her alone, leave her alone? And why does he call out their scolding and their fault-finding? Why does he do that? Well, what's their charge? Somebody turn that phone off. What's their charge? Well, it's too much. It's too extravagant. It's out of proportion. It's not right. It's unseemly. And Jesus says, I strongly disagree. Now, let me ask you. If a person says something about something in the Bible means this, or says something about certain behaviors are right or wrong, or they talk about preferences or opinions or feelings, and Jesus comes along and says the exact opposite of what that person has said, who's right? Well, every time it's Jesus. Every time it's Jesus. And in this case, he's of the opposite opinion from them, and he calls them out, and he says, it's not too much. $66,226. It's not too much. What is the most costly gift you can give? It's always your time. It's always your time. And time with him is never too much. I've seen it over and over and over again. I've been in rooms where people are in their last hours and know it. Sometimes I think it's a gift that God gives to families, those last hours. But I've seen it over and over again. And the person who knows they're going home, they're They're not anxious about their money or their possessions or their car or anything else, their hobbies, none of that. The thing that they want and cherish more than anything else is to have their kids hold their hand. In those final hours, to have somebody that they intensely love. Just be with them and spend time with them. That's what matters. That's the best. Time is the best. And wasting time with Jesus is never too extravagant, you see. It's the best. Wasting time with Jesus is absolutely the best, and it's the best for several reasons. It's the best because it's irreplaceable. You can't replace your time, you see. You can't replace your time. If the time is spent on something, it can't be spent on something else, and you can't recall it. This last week, I had to spend a time with a bunch of attorneys. That's a fate worse than death. As you probably know, we don't talk a great deal about it, but there's an ongoing civil suit for somebody that did something awful a whole bunch of years ago, and it seems like it won't go away. There's no way they can hurt our church. We prepared a long time ago against that, but anyway, they keep trying. They don't know how dumb they are. So I had to do another deposition this week. And when I got done with all those knucklehead attorneys with their inane questions, I thought, well, that's another hour and a half I'm never going to get back. That's true. That's true. Once it's gone, it's gone. And if you used it that way, you can't recall it. But last night I spent over an hour with one of our young men on the phone just answering questions and helping him to see things. And it was a great conversation, and I don't begrudge that at all. I don't want that time back, but I sure wish I had that lawyer time back. But my point is that time is a great gift to Jesus because you can't replace it. It's one and done. It's gone. But it's also personal. There are very few things more personal than your time. It's my time. And I can distribute it as I want. Any day that I want. And Jesus recognizes that. His reaction to this woman is he is so pleased with what she does, her extravagance, and it's the same. When you waste time with Jesus, he's pleased because it's your time. You see? And your time is limited. That's another thing that makes it the best gift to spend on Jesus, because it's limited. It's limited. Remember Jesus last night on earth? He goes into the garden, to the place of prayer, and he takes 3 with him, and he says, I want you fellows to pray with me. Stay up and pray with me. They don't. And he goes back and he says, couldn't you just watch with me 1 hour? But turn that on its head. What if they had? What a gift that would have been to Jesus to know that they were with him for an hour. That's all he wanted before they came and drug him away. And it's the same with you. That irreplaceable personal gift of your time, it's limited. And when you give Jesus time, when you waste time with Jesus, his reaction is something along the lines of, you would spend your hour with me? And it means so much to him, you see? So much to him. Wasting time with Jesus is never too extravagant. It's always the best. And wasting time with Jesus is very, very meaningful. They say to the woman, why are you doing this? And they give this cockamamie idea, we could have sold it to the poor like they would have. I think their designs on that money were a little more closer to home. But they scold her and they yell at her and they criticize her. Why are you incurring this great waste here? But they forgot that he's the one, Jesus is the one that she's wasting it on. Their opinion doesn't mean anything. His means everything. And to him it was very meaningful what she did. Don't make the mistake that they did. And don't forget that the time we spend with Jesus is meaningful to him, you see. There are a lot of Christians who avoid time with Jesus because they don't know what to do. They're trying too hard. They think you have to have an agenda. What am I going to say? Am I going to get bored? Is he going to be mad at me? And so they avoid spending time with Jesus because, frankly, they're making it too hard. It's not that hard. Jesus wants you to spend time with him so he can love you. And he wants to love you. He wants to love you in such a way that you become a person of love. You see? He wants to turn you into a person of love, and you do that by letting him spend time with you and you with him so that he can just love you. No agenda. Just spend time with him. You see? Jesus wants to love you. He wants to love you. And when you spend time with him, you find out what's really worth your time. I've got a saying, I say it all the time, you can't spend the same dollar twice. You know what I mean by that? If I spend my money, on a double cheeseburger, then I can't get the socks that I really need because mine got a hole in them. Okay? Can't spend the same dollar twice. Well, it's the same with time. You can't spend the same time twice. Once it's gone, it's gone. Once you've set it aside or invested it in something or other, it's gone. And when you spend time with Jesus, when you waste time with Jesus, it reorients you to where you can see what's really not worth your time. Just let me give you a practical tip on wasting time with Jesus. Set aside a few minutes every day. And at different seasons in our life, it's got different degrees of difficulty around it. When our girls were little, my time alone with Jesus was in the car when I was by myself because there was too much activity most of the other time. But set aside a few moments wherever it might be. And get your coffee or whatever it is you like. And sit down. And start with hi. Now, some days you'll find that your spirit is alert and focused, and your heart will burn with the thought, you're really, really here with me. And other days, your mind will be like a banana tree full of monkeys. But it's okay. Just spend time with him. Either way, you'll begin to find that it's the best part of your day when you waste time with Jesus. Of course, you'll find out that it's the best part of your day. But of course, our crazy culture that's so digitally obsessed and distracted and fragmented, and it's all agog over being super productive every moment of every day, is going to tell you it's a waste. When you slow down, when you get into the quiet with Jesus, when you come alive to him, you'll come alive to yourself. That's why I say it'll be the best part of your day. And you let him love you into a person of love. As we wrap this up, two things. Jesus' evaluation, defense of her. She has done what she could. The $66,000 worth of ointment that seems extravagant to you, she's done what she could. How long, how much of her life was invested in that alabaster vial? Years. But Jesus says she's done what she could. And my question is, have you? Have you done what you could with Jesus? When we think about things like this may be a good time for Psalm 139. Search me, O God. Know my heart. She's done what she could, have I? And the other thing is a word of caution. Wasting time with Jesus is very countercultural. It's very against the grain of our society and the way we're told to live life, to waste time with Jesus. We hear people all around us say, oh, do what you want. It's your religion. Live and let live. Do what works for you. Freedom of conscience, tolerance, coexist, all of that sort of thing. Let me tell you what, they don't really mean it. You're wasting time with Jesus really bothers people. It mystifies people. It troubles people. They look at it and they don't see it. Look at our chapter 14, verse 4 and 5. But some were indignantly remarking to one another, why has this perfume been wasted? For this perfume, $66,000 worth, might have been sold for over 300 denarii and the money given to the poor, and they were scolding her. You see what they're doing here? They're spinning a beautiful gesture, meaningful beyond words to Jesus himself. It's part of Jesus' death story. And they spun it. And they turned it into something bad and selfish. Something that was bizarrely inappropriate and callous. And they even say it hurt the poor people what you did. And Matthew, as I said, tells us that that comes from the lips of other followers, disciples. Fellow followers said that. When people say that your gift of time to Jesus, your gift of treasure to Jesus, your gift of talent to Jesus, that wasting time with Jesus, or when you say it to yourself, when we say that that is a waste, that spending time with Jesus is a waste, just smile. You can smile a knowing smile. Don't listen to their nonsense and waste more time with Jesus. Let me give you a last tip. When it comes to wasting time with Jesus, just keep showing up. That's all. Let's stand together.